Hey guys, Akio Murasaki here as always. Today we have an article from Eurogamer about Concord. Yes, you heard it right, Concord. Apparently game journalists and the broader public, I guess, simply cannot let this game disappear and be forgotten forever. Yeah, we need to discuss it again. No shade here on Connor and no shade on Eurogamer here specifically, but yes, we need to talk about Conquer again because apparently now it has made rounds in the UK's House of Commons. Yes, they are discussing Concord, and its sudden shutdown is such a big deal. It's been brought up during UK government debates on video game consumer laws. Yeah, that's exactly what it says, and it's true. It's not a clickbait title here. It is absolutely true. Both Concord and a couple of other games were brought up in discussions regarding consumer laws and consumer protection, specifically when purchasing digital goods that are being terminated prematurely. And we hear even prematurely is not even specified. So there's a lot of avenues, a lot of gaps in legislation and how digital products, especially live service games, are being treated. But let's get on with the article. The UK's House of Commons has debated the need for improved video game consumer protections. There's always plenty of room for that, unfortunately I have to say. The European Union, as far as I know at least, is doing a much better job than the US, but there is still plenty of room for improvement when it comes to protecting the gamers, yes, so the consumers of the product, when they purchase digital-only games. In this debate, Concord's sudden shutdown was used as an example of a game shutdown suddenly. Well, it was sudden. Okay, let's be honest. Was it expected? Yes. The writing was absolutely on the wall. We knew it's going to happen. We knew it's going to happen even before the game released. I will also mention this here. But here it's specifically about consumer protection. Yes, it was shut down suddenly. The decision was made to shut it down by the developers, by the publisher, by Sony here specifically, that was handling quote-unquote distribution of the game. One MP stated in their statement, a recent example is Concord, a game released for PlayStation 5 and Windows in August 2024. So yeah, it's been a while, but we still need to talk about it. Following a disappointing launch, an understatement really, Sony Interactive Entertainment made a commercial decision to shut it down. Yes, they basically decided that the use of the product, the video game Concord, is being terminated. So they basically terminated their side of the agreement, which if you've read the terms of service that are either fairly vague or they leave a lot of room, unfortunately, for the owner, the publisher, to do anything they essentially want with the product, including your access as a user to the product, including even changes to the terms of service itself. I know not a lot of people read the terms of service, but unfortunately it's so open, it leaves so much room and so much power to the publisher that it should really be legal. And I'm glad that this is being brought up, at least in the UK, and hopefully maybe later at some point in the European Union more broadly. To their credit, they did refund all purchases, I'm assuming, of the game, but this isn't always the case. And here quoting again this MP specifically, I know that honorable members will agree that where publishers fail to make the lifespan of a game clear at the point of sale, they must be held accountable. Now this is a very interesting point because typically live service games, they don't have a defined lifespan. It simply doesn't exist. The assumption is that the game will run for as long as necessary. When you are purchasing the game, and again, read the terms of service, guys. If you are purchasing the game, you're only purchasing access to the product, yes, for the time being, for when the product is available. Yes, unfortunately that's what it says there. So basically it's within the discretion of the publisher or within the discretion of the dev team, if they're self-published, to handle how long the product is available. That's why I welcome the strengthened consumer protections, including the Digital Markets, Competition and Consumers Act 2024, quite interesting here, which came into force earlier this year. This legislation rightly requires traders to provide clear, timely, and accurate information to consumers, including the longevity and functionality of digital products. This is a much broader topic than just video games, and I'm kind of glad that even though it's Concord and other games, that this is being brought up into a broader discussion because it finally needs to be dealt with. I have some very strong thoughts about this. I am kind of very outdated, but I still hold the opinion that if you are buying a product, you should be allowed full and unrestricted access to that copy of the product that you're buying. And for instance, platforms like Steam, they do to some extent guarantee this or offer a means to make this possible. For instance, at least as far as I remember, I don't know whether this is still the case, but Steam used to offer you the possibility of creating like a backup disk for your specific game, so that even if there is like a problem with the Steam platform or the game is no longer available, you are still able to install the game or recover the game from the backup. I'm not sure if this is still the case, but many more platforms should offer this as a possibility as well. That when you are buying a product, it shouldn't be like with live service games, is that you only get access to the product, you don't own the product itself. You should, as is the case with books for instance, you should at least own that one copy of the product. That should be the bare minimum. And that unfortunately is not the case right now. With games such as Concord, that was kind of doubly problematic. And here are also the other mentions, the Crew, as well as Anthem. But it was kind of more problematic because you paid for the game, so it was not for free. And you only got access to the game, right? So it was within the full discretion of the publishers to do with the game whatever they like to. And there should be, I personally believe, there should be some stipulations. There should be, since the longevity was mentioned, there should be at least like, if you buy a product, it should be available for at least a year since purchase, for instance, or since the game was launched or whatever. I guess since the game was officially launched, you should have at least 1 year of service, something like that. Some studios do this. There's been a recent case, for instance, when a game was clearly going into kind of like maintenance only mode. I think it was called The New Worlds or something. And they decided it is going to be available through 2026. But then it's going to be shut down. So the servers are running, no new content, but you can still play the game for at least a year. I don't know whether the game, that one, The New Worlds, is specifically a paid game, but if it's a paid game, you should at least get a year of the service free. And in some cases, there should be kind of like an offline mode, even if the game has some kind of, if the game has some sort of campaign. They should offer you like an extended offline mode or downloadable but like kind of non-server story only mode or something. And I know that this was the case, for instance, with Senran Kagura, with one of the, I can't remember what the, what was it called? It was one of the latest, I think Spirit Link or something. That was one of the latest gacha games. I got into it, but then I kind of didn't really play it. When I came back, it was put into this, you can download the game, you can play it for a period of time until it's fully shut down, but you can still experience the story itself, all of the chapters and everything. So that is also a very good option. And again, these things should be, as these MPs are bringing up here, these things should be guaranteed legally. It should not be left to the discretion of the individual publishers to kind of decide what they want to do with the game, and each of them does something else. No, it should be legally mandated, and I hope that if the UK, it won't, spoiler alert right now yet, but eventually if it gets brought up again, then they will strengthen the consumer protection laws, and later on this is also going to be extended to European Union, And I think a lot of people, because for instance, what is being brought up here is the Stop Killing Games initiative, which I think in the case of these games specifically is a very poor example because they are effectively live service games. And I think Stop Killing Games, I'm not sure if it targets that specifically, but I feel personally that the focus should be more on games that are kind of standalone experiences, like single player games or very campaign heavy online games that should be offered in a way that the player can experience them without being online when the server is closed, for instance. There should be a possibility like this. And again, that should be guaranteed legally in both the UK and then later on, or maybe already in the European Union. And then hopefully the US also kind of does that as well. But here, and of course, as is mentioned here, gamers still feel the deep sense of personal possession, maybe not for Concord, but in general, because they invest more than money, they invest time. For Concord, I think it was open for like a week or two, so the time investment was non-existent here. But people still did spend money, the money was returned, but they did spend money on this, they did spend resources on the game. So yeah, that should be returned, that should be honored in one way or another. But basically, as I said, it should be legally defined how much time a game is available online, and there should be also kind of like an offline, legally justified offline mode for this. But kind of moving on to Concord, I kind of wish this was there was a broader discussion about Concord itself. And of course, game journalists are not going to admit this, even though this is a fair article from Eurogamer. I don't think game journalists are going to fully admit that Concord was a financial disaster. So even looking from the perspective of the studio, since Sony did refund the purchases, that basically means they made no income from the game. This was a loss on the game. If all of the purchases of the games were refunded, they made zero money whatsoever, and that is a massive problem, plus the costs. Now, I am not 100% familiar, since some of the details are obviously only internal to the studio that was developing Concord and also to Sony, but to my knowledge, the game already had a pretty big budget before Sony bought its studio, the studio that made Concord. And even after that, they invested even more money. So to my understanding from the other coverage I've seen, they've invested around $500 million, and the game was in full development for 8 years. That is absolutely insane. This is similar to kind of the bigger blunders, I would say, in the movie industry. Things like this should simply not be happening. Because once you cross the 100 million and eventually the 300 million million threshold for the budget, having any sort of returns becomes nearly impossible. Like, it needs to be a breakout one, in a life, maybe not one in a lifetime, one in a 10-year success to really make the money back. And that is simply not going to happen in 99% or 95% of the cases. You're simply not going to see that money being returned. And I feel like the broader discussion that needs to happen with Sony, specifically and internally within Sony, is why was this product, why was the development of Concord allowed to happen, and why was so much money wasted on this one specific project? Because here, for instance, the discussions are about consumers as in us gamers. Obviously, the client is always right and they should be on top, but there's also a discussion of people who are actually investing in those projects. And the people, they were left dry, man. The people who invested in Concord, they lost a lot of money. And this is bad. This should, in the industry as it is right now, with like all of its crunch and all of its massive losses, especially after the corona crisis and the pandemic, things like this should really not be happening. So people should, and I'm kind of surprised that game journalists are actually not bringing that up, because they have the access, they have still the authority in a way, they should really scrutinize projects like Concord and ask, where is the money? Where did the money go, Lebowski? Because we want to know. We as gamers really, it's not our money, okay? So we don't really have any win or loss in this. But it needs to be asked, why spend so much money on these projects and end up after 8 years with something that lasts only like a week or two and needs to be refunded? This is a no-go, and if you are going to blame gamers at any point, if you are going to say, oh, Concord failed because of the gamers, do not dare ever to say this. It was not the gamers who pumped crazy amounts of money into the project. No, it was the studio who made a quote-unquote investment, and also not with their own money, right, for the money from the investors. So things like this should really be highlighted and scrutinized much more. I kind of wish that was happening. But still, I am taking this article as a bit of a small win that the UK government at least is having some discussions around consumer protections, and I feel like if this is kind of like discussed more broadly as I'm doing right now, then other content creators, other gamers are going to, the public in general, not just the gamers, are going to voice their opinions and maybe encourage the governments around the world to take a stance and really work on these laws. Because as is obvious from this article, it is not only about games, it is about the longevity and functionality of digital products more broadly. So I think it's a battle we can all get behind, and I hope we really do. But that's basically it from my side, and I hope to see you guys in the next one. Mata ne!